Here's what they won't tell you about becoming a surrogate mother until you've already signed the contract. I'm going to walk you through the 12 most critical pieces of information that surrogates discover the hard way. These are the things that agencies gloss over during those initial meetings. The things that intended parents don't always understand themselves. And the things that can make or break your entire surrogacy experience. Because here's the reality. Most women go into surrogacy thinking they know what they're signing up for. They've done the research. They've talked to their families. They've maybe even spoken to 1 or 2 other surrogates. But then reality hits, and suddenly they're dealing with situations they never saw coming. I've worked with hundreds of surrogates over the years, and the ones who have the best experiences are always the ones who knew what to expect before they started. Not just the beautiful moments, not just the positive stories you see on social media, but the real, unfiltered truth about what this journey actually involves. So let's get into it. The medical reality they don't emphasize enough. The first thing you need to understand is that the medical process is going to be way more intense than anyone lets on during those initial conversations. When you sit down with a surrogacy agency for the first time, they'll mention medications. They'll talk about injections. They might even show you a timeline. But what they don't fully convey is just how much your body is going to go through before you even get pregnant. Let's start with the medications. You're going to be taking hormone injections. Progesterone, estrogen, sometimes Luprin to suppress your natural cycle. These aren't little pills you swallow with breakfast. These are intramuscular injections. That means needles going deep into your muscle tissue, usually in your hip or your upper thigh. And you're going to be doing this daily, sometimes twice daily, for weeks. The progesterone injections in particular are something that catches a lot of surrogates off guard. The oil-based formula is thick. It hurts going in, and it often causes knots and lumps under your skin at the injection sites. Your hips might get so sore that you can't sleep on your side. You might develop bruising that lasts for weeks. Some surrogates end up with permanent lumps of scar tissue at their injection sites. And this is all before the embryo transfer even happens. Then there's the monitoring appointments. You're going to be going to the fertility clinic a lot, like multiple times a week during certain phases. Early morning appointments where they do blood draws and transvaginal ultrasounds to check your lining and hormone levels. This means rearranging your work schedule, finding childcare for your own kids, driving sometimes hours to the clinic if you don't live nearby. The embryo transfer itself is usually straightforward. It's a quick procedure. Doesn't require anesthesia in most cases, but it does require a full bladder. And I mean uncomfortably full. You have to drink a specific amount of water beforehand and then hold it while they do the procedure. It's not pleasant. And then you're on modified bed rest for anywhere from 1 to 3 days afterward. But here's what really gets overlooked. The mental aspect of all this medical intervention. Every shot you take, you're hoping this is the one that leads to a successful pregnancy. Every monitoring appointment, you're waiting for good news about your lining thickness. Every twinge and cramp after the transfer, you're analyzing whether it means implantation is happening. The 2-week wait between transfer and the pregnancy test is brutal. You're trying not to get your hopes up, but you're also invested. You want this to work, not just for yourself, but for the intended parents who are counting on you. And if that first transfer doesn't work, you do it all again. All the medications, all the injections, all the appointments, all the hope and stress and waiting. The average surrogate goes through 1.5 embryo transfers before achieving a successful pregnancy. That means about half of all surrogates need more than one attempt. But most surrogates go into this thinking they'll be the one who gets pregnant on the first try. Then once you're pregnant, you're still on medications. The progesterone injections often continue through the first trimester, sometimes longer. You're still going to monitoring appointments. You're still coordinating with the clinic and the intended parents in your agency. And your body is going through pregnancy, which is already a lot. But this time you're doing it for someone else, which adds a whole different layer of complexity to how you experience it. The financial reality is more complicated than it seems. Let's talk about money, because this is where a lot of surrogates get surprised by things they didn't expect. Yes, you're going to be compensated. Most surrogates in the United States make anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 as a base compensation. That number varies based on where you live, whether it's your first surrogacy or a repeat journey, and what agency you work with. But here's what they don't always make clear. You don't get all that money up front, and you don't get it all at once. The typical payment structure breaks your compensation down into monthly payments that start after a confirmed heartbeat. That usually happens around week 6 or 7 of pregnancy. So you've already been doing medications for weeks. You've already been going to appointments. You've already been organizing your life around this process. And you haven't seen $1 yet. Then the monthly payments start. But they're spread out over the pregnancy. So if your base compensation is $40,000, you might be getting around $4,000 a month, which is significant. But it's not the lump sum that some surrogates imagine when they hear the total number. And there are a lot of expenses that come up that you need to cover yourself in the moment. Then you get reimbursed later. Things like mileage to and from appointments, parking fees at the clinic, childcare while you're at appointments, maternity clothes, over-the-counter medications, vitamins. The list goes on. Most surrogacy contracts include allowances for these things. But the way it usually works is you pay for it, you save your receipts, you submit them to your escrow account or agency, and then you get reimbursed. That reimbursement might take a few days. It might take a few weeks. In the meantime, you're covering those costs. For surrogates who are living paycheck to paycheck, or who don't have a lot of financial cushion, this can create stress. You're putting out money consistently and waiting to get it back. Then there's taxes, because your surrogacy compensation is taxable income. A lot of surrogates don't realize this until they get their 1099 form after the birth. And then they owe taxes on all that money they received. Depending on your tax bracket and what state you live in, you could owe anywhere from 20 to 30% of your compensation in taxes. That $40,000 you earned? After taxes, it might be closer to $28,000 or $30,000. Some surrogates work with accountants who help them navigate this. There are certain expenses you can deduct, but you need to keep detailed records and understand what qualifies. Most surrogates aren't prepared for this aspect of it. There's also the question of lost wages. If you have complications during pregnancy that require bed rest, most contracts cover lost wages. But you need to prove what you would have been earning. And there's usually a cap on how much they'll pay. If you're someone who makes a high hourly wage or salary, the lost wages coverage might not come close to what you actually lose. And then there's unpaid time off. Even if you don't have complications, you're taking time off work for appointments. You might need to take time off after the birth before you're cleared to return to work. Not all of that is covered. Here's another financial reality that surprises people. Your health insurance might not cover surrogacy. More and more insurance companies are putting in specific exclusions for surrogate pregnancies. They'll cover your own pregnancy. But if you're pregnant as a surrogate, they consider that different. And they won't pay. This means the intended parents need to either get you on their insurance, which isn't always possible, or purchase a separate surrogacy insurance policy for you. These policies exist, but they're expensive, and they don't cover everything. If your insurance does cover surrogacy, you still have copays and deductibles. The intended parents typically reimburse you for these. But again, you're often paying them first and getting reimbursed later. All of this means you need to be financially stable going into surrogacy. You need savings to cover unexpected expenses. You need to be able to float costs while waiting for reimbursement. You need to plan for the tax implications. The compensation is real. And for many surrogates, it's life-changing money. It allows them to pay off debt, save for their kids' education, make a down payment on a house, or achieve financial goals they couldn't reach otherwise. But it's not as straightforward as seeing the total compensation number and thinking that's what's going into your bank account. Your relationship with the intended parents can make or break everything. This is probably the most important thing on this entire list. And it's something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The relationship between you and the intended parents is going to define your entire surrogacy experience. When it works well, it's amazing. You form a deep connection with these people. You're helping them become parents. You're part of one of the most important moments of their lives. You get to see their joy when they hear the heartbeat for the first time. You get to watch them tear up at ultrasounds. You get to hand them their baby after birth and witness pure love and gratitude. But when the relationship doesn't work well, surrogacy becomes incredibly difficult. Here's the thing. You're going to be in close contact with these people for over a year. From the matching process through pregnancy and birth. You're going to be texting them updates, sending them ultrasound pictures, coordinating about appointments and decisions, discussing your body and your health in intimate detail. And there's no guarantee you're going to click with them as people. The matching process is supposed to help with this. You'll have conversations before you commit. You'll discuss expectations and communication styles and boundaries. But the truth is, you can't really know how compatible you are until you're in the thick of it. Some intended parents are incredibly respectful of boundaries. They check in regularly but not excessively. They trust you to take care of yourself and the pregnancy. They express gratitude. They include you in decisions when appropriate and respect your autonomy when it comes to your own body and medical choices. Other intended parents are anxious. They want constant updates. They question your choices. They might have strong opinions about what you should eat, how much you should exercise, whether you should travel, what medications you should take. They treat you more like an employee or a vessel than a person. And here's what makes this complicated. You can't really blame anxious intended parents for being anxious. They're putting their hopes and dreams, and often a huge amount of money into this process. They don't have control over what's happening. The baby is growing inside someone else's body. That's terrifying for them. But that doesn't mean it's easy for you to deal with. There are stories of intended parents who show up unannounced at the surrogate's home, who call or text multiple times a day, who want to be at every single medical appointment, even the routine ones, who have opinions about everything from the surrogate's diet to whether she's getting enough rest to what kind of childbirth she should have. On the flip side, there are also intended parents who are too hands-off, who don't seem interested or engaged, who miss appointments, who don't respond to messages, who make the surrogate feel like they're going through this alone. Both extremes are hard. The ideal is somewhere in the middle. Regular communication that feels natural and comfortable, mutual respect, shared excitement about the pregnancy, clear boundaries that both sides honor. But you don't always get that. And here's the really tricky part. Once you're matched and you've started medications, it's very hard to back out. Not impossible, but complicated. You've signed contracts. The intended parents have invested money. Everyone has invested emotionally. If the relationship isn't working, you kind of have to make it work anyway. This is why the matching process is so critical. Don't rush it. Don't agree to match with intended parents just because the agency is pushing it or because you're eager to get started. Really take the time to get to know them. Ask hard questions. Questions about how they handle stress, how they communicate when things don't go according to plan, what their expectations are for involvement during the pregnancy. Pay attention to how they respond. Are they respectful? Do they listen? Do they seem to view you as a whole person with your own life and needs? Or do they seem primarily focused on the end goal of getting their baby? Think about communication styles. Are you someone who likes to text throughout the day? Or do you prefer a weekly phone call? Do they want constant updates, or are they comfortable with less frequent check-ins? If you're a private person and they want to be at every appointment and know every detail, that mismatch is going to cause friction. Talk about the birth plan. Who's going to be in the delivery room? What happens if complications arise? What if the baby needs to be in the NICU? What if you need an emergency C-section? These conversations might feel premature, but they're important. And be honest with yourself about what you need. Some surrogates want a close, ongoing relationship with the intended parents and the baby after birth. Others want to carry the baby, hand them over, and step back. Neither approach is wrong, but you need to be matched with intended parents who want the same thing. Because mismatched expectations about post-birth contact is another area where things can get messy. If you're expecting photos and updates and visits, and the intended parents want to close that chapter and move on, you're going to feel hurt and rejected. If you're expecting to step back, and the intended parents want you deeply involved in their child's life, you might feel obligated or uncomfortable. Get all of this in writing in your contract, but also have honest conversations about it. Your agency should be facilitating these discussions. If they're not, that's a red flag about the agency. A good agency knows that the surrogate-intended parent relationship is the foundation of a successful journey. They'll take the time to make good matches and support both sides throughout. If at any point during the process the relationship becomes toxic or unmanageable, talk to your agency. They should mediate. They should help establish boundaries. They should advocate for you. Because you deserve to be treated with respect. Always. Even when disagreements happen. Even when things get stressful, you're doing something extraordinary. You're going through physical and emotional challenges to help someone else become a parent. That deserves gratitude and kindness. The emotional complexity is real and it's okay. Let's talk about the emotional side of surrogacy, because this is where a lot of surrogates feel caught off guard. The narrative around surrogacy is usually very positive. You're helping someone create a family. You're giving an incredible gift. It's a beautiful, selfless act. And all of that is true. But it's also emotionally complicated in ways that nobody really prepares you for. First, there's the attachment question. Everyone wants to know if you're going to get attached to the baby, if it's going to be hard to hand the baby over. Most surrogates will tell you they don't feel like it's their baby. And that's usually true. You know from the beginning that this baby isn't yours. It's not your genetics in most cases. You're carrying it for someone else. That's the whole point. But that doesn't mean you don't feel anything. You're pregnant. You feel the baby move. You watch your body change. You go through all the physical sensations of pregnancy. You might find yourself thinking about the baby, wondering what they'll be like, hoping they're healthy, feeling protective of them. That's normal. That doesn't mean you want to keep the baby. It just means you're human. Some surrogates feel a sense of loss after the birth. Not because they want the baby, but because pregnancy becomes such a big part of your identity for 9 months. It's all-consuming. Your body is different. Your routines are different. You're constantly aware of this life inside you. And then suddenly it's over. The baby is with their parents. And you go back to your regular life. That transition can be jarring. You might feel empty, or purposeless, or just strange. That's normal too. Then there's the emotional labor of managing everyone else's feelings. You're managing the intended parent's anxiety and excitement. You're reassuring your own family that you're okay. You're explaining to friends and acquaintances what surrogacy is and why you're doing it. You're dealing with people's judgments and opinions. Because people have a lot of opinions about surrogacy. Some people think it's wonderful. Others think it's weird. Some people have religious or ethical objections. Some people worry you're being exploited. Some people ask invasive questions about money or genetics or your relationship with the intended parents. You're going to hear comments like, "I could never do that," or, "Aren't you worried you'll want to keep the baby?" Or, "What does your husband think about you carrying another man's child?" People mean well usually, but these comments can be exhausting. And then there's your own family. Your partner might be supportive, but they're also watching you go through something physically and emotionally demanding. They might worry about your health. They might feel protective. They might struggle with seeing you pregnant when it's not their baby. If you have kids, they're going to have questions. They might be excited about having a baby in the house, and then confused when the baby leaves. You need to explain surrogacy in age-appropriate ways, and reassure them that you're okay. Some surrogates feel like they have to be positive all the time, like they can't complain or express negative feelings because they chose this, because the intended parents are counting on them, because admitting that something is hard feels like being ungrateful or uncommitted. But here's the truth. You can be grateful for the opportunity and still find it difficult. You can love being a surrogate and still have hard days. You can believe in what you're doing and still feel overwhelmed sometimes. It's okay to have complicated feelings. It's okay to need support. It's okay to admit when something is harder than you expected. This is why having a good support system is so important. Other surrogates who understand what you're going through. A therapist who specializes in reproductive issues. Friends and family who listen without judgment. Most surrogacy contracts include a requirement for counseling. Usually a screening session before you start, and sometimes ongoing counseling during the pregnancy. Take advantage of this. Even if you feel fine, talking to someone can help you process everything. And be honest with yourself about your mental health going into this. If you have a history of depression or anxiety, that doesn't necessarily disqualify you. But you need to be stable. You need to have coping strategies. You need to be working with a mental health professional if needed. Pregnancy hormones affect everyone differently. Some surrogates feel amazing. Others struggle with mood swings or anxiety or depression. If you have a history of perinatal mood disorders, there's a higher chance you might experience them again. None of this means you shouldn't be a surrogate. It just means you need to go in with your eyes open. You need to have support in place. You need to be prepared for the emotional complexity. Because surrogacy is beautiful. It absolutely is. But it's also hard. And both things can be true at the same time. The legal side is more important than you think. Let's talk about contracts. Because this is not something you can afford to skim through or ignore. When you match with intended parents, you're going to sign a surrogacy contract. This is a legal document that outlines everyone's rights, responsibilities, and expectations. And it's probably going to be 30 to 60 pages long. Do not sign this contract without having your own attorney review it. Not the intended parent's attorney. Not the agency's attorney. Your own attorney who represents only you. Most surrogacy contracts require that each party has independent legal counsel. This is for your protection. Your attorney will review the contract, explain what everything means, point out any concerning clauses, and negotiate on your behalf if needed. And you need to actually read the contract. Not just trust your attorney to handle it. Read it yourself. Ask questions about anything you don't understand. Make sure you're comfortable with everything before you sign. Here are some of the critical things that should be in your contract. Compensation. What's your base compensation? When do payments start? How are they structured? What happens if the pregnancy ends early? What additional payments are you entitled to for things like C-sections, multiples, loss of reproductive organs, bed rest, or other complications? Medical expenses. Who pays for what? What insurance are you using? What happens if there are expenses that insurance doesn't cover? How quickly will you be reimbursed for out-of-pocket costs? Lost wages. If you need to miss work, how is that calculated? What documentation do you need? Is there a cap? Medical decisions. Who has the final say on medical decisions during pregnancy? In most cases, this should be you. It's your body, but the contract should clearly state that. It should also outline what happens in emergency situations. What if the baby is in distress and doctors recommend a C-section but you wanted a vaginal birth? What if prenatal testing shows abnormalities? Selective reduction. This is a hard topic, but it needs to be addressed. If you're carrying multiples and there are medical reasons to reduce, who makes that decision? Some surrogates are comfortable with this possibility. Others are not. You need to know where the intended parents stand and make sure your views align. Termination. What happens if prenatal testing shows severe abnormalities? What if continuing the pregnancy puts your health at serious risk? Who decides whether to continue or terminate? This is another difficult conversation, but it's essential. If you're morally opposed to termination under any circumstances, and the intended parents would want to terminate in certain situations, you're not compatible. Lifestyle requirements. The contract will outline what's expected of you during pregnancy. Things like no smoking, no drinking, no illegal drugs. That's standard and reasonable. But pay attention to other restrictions. Can you travel? Can you exercise? Can you have sex? Can you eat certain foods? Make sure you're comfortable with any restrictions. Intended parents' involvement. What level of involvement will they have? Are they expected at appointments? Can they be in the delivery room? How often should you communicate? Having this spelled out can prevent misunderstandings later. Post-birth contact. What happens after the baby is born? Will you exchange photos and updates? Will there be visits? Or is it a closed arrangement after birth? Again, make sure this matches what you want. Breach of contract. What happens if someone doesn't hold up their end of the agreement? What if the intended parents stop paying you? What if you do something that violates the contract? What's the resolution process? This might all sound overwhelming. And honestly, it can be. Legal documents are dense and full of jargon. But this is your protection. This is what ensures you're treated fairly and compensated appropriately. Don't let anyone pressure you to sign quickly. Don't let anyone make you feel like asking questions or requesting changes is difficult or unreasonable. This is your right. And here's something else to know. The legal side of surrogacy varies hugely by state. Some states are very surrogacy-friendly. They have clear laws that support surrogacy arrangements. They allow pre-birth orders, which means the intended parents can be listed on the birth certificate right away without needing to adopt. Other states have no laws about surrogacy at all. It's a legal gray area. And some states actually have laws against compensated surrogacy or don't recognize surrogacy contracts. This matters because it affects how enforceable your contract is. It affects what happens if there's a dispute. It affects the process after birth. If you live in a state that's not surrogacy friendly, you might need to travel to another state for medical care and delivery. Or the legal process after birth might be more complicated. Your attorney will help you navigate this. But the point is, the legal side matters. It protects you. It protects the intended parents. It protects the baby. Take it seriously. Your body is going to change in ways you don't expect. You've been pregnant before. That's one of the requirements for being a surrogate. So you think you know what to expect from pregnancy. But here's what a lot of surrogates discover. Every pregnancy is different, and a surrogacy pregnancy can feel very different from carrying your own children. First, there's the fact that you're hyper-aware of your body in a different way. When you're pregnant with your own child, you're focused on preparing for that child to join your family. You're thinking about names and nurseries and how your life is about to change. When you're a surrogate, you're thinking about someone else's experience. You're carrying someone else's hope. Every symptom, every milestone, every appointment is something you're experiencing on behalf of the intended parents. That changes your relationship with your body. Some surrogates say it feels empowering, like their body is doing something amazing. Others say it feels disconnected or strange. Then there are the physical changes. You're going to gain weight. How much varies, but the average is somewhere between 25 and 35 pounds. Some of that is baby, placenta, amniotic fluid. Some is increased blood volume and fluid retention. Some is fat storage. And here's what nobody really talks about. That weight might not come off as easily as it did after your previous pregnancies. You're older now probably. Your metabolism is different. Your body has been through pregnancy multiple times. It might hold on to weight more stubbornly. Most surrogates do eventually return to their pre-pregnancy weight. But it takes time and effort, and it might take longer than you expect. Your skin is going to stretch. You might get new stretch marks even if you didn't get them in previous pregnancies. Your belly might not snap back the way it did before. You might end up with loose skin or a different body shape. These are the realities of pregnancy. But when you're doing it for someone else, it can feel more complicated. You're changing your body for someone else's benefit. You're accepting permanent physical changes to help someone else become a parent. For most surrogates, that's okay. They knew going in that their body would change. It's worth it for the gift they're giving. But it's still something to process. Then there's the possibility of complications. And this is where things can get really serious. Most pregnancies go smoothly, but some don't. And when you're a surrogate, you're accepting the risk of complications that could have serious impacts on your health. Gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, placenta previa, preterm labor, hemorrhage. These are all risks of pregnancy. They can happen to anyone. But if they happen to you as a surrogate, you're dealing with them while also managing your obligations to the intended parents. And in rare cases, pregnancy complications can be life-threatening, or they can result in permanent changes to your health. Things like emergency hysterectomy, organ damage, chronic pain, blood clots. The risk of these severe complications is low, but it's not zero. And you need to understand and accept that risk before you become a surrogate. This is part of why the screening process is so thorough. They want to make sure you're healthy, that you have a history of uncomplicated pregnancies, that you're not at high risk for complications. But even healthy women with perfect pregnancy histories can develop complications. Bodies are unpredictable. Your contract should include compensation for complications, additional payments if you develop gestational diabetes or preeclampsia, significant payments if you lose reproductive organs or have other major complications. This doesn't undo the physical impact, but it acknowledges the sacrifice. You also need to think about recovery. After you give birth, you're going to need time to heal. If you have a vaginal birth, recovery is usually a few weeks. If you have a C-section, it's longer, closer to 6 to 8 weeks before you're fully healed. During that time, you can't lift heavy things. You can't do strenuous exercise. You need rest. And if you have your own kids at home, that can be challenging. Who's going to help you? Who's going to take care of your children while you recover? Most surrogacy contracts include some support for recovery. Maybe they cover a house cleaner for a few weeks, or meal delivery, or childcare, but you need to plan for this. And emotionally, recovery can be complicated. Your body just went through something intense. Your hormones are all over the place. You might feel great. You might feel awful. You might feel weepy or exhausted or overwhelmed. And you're doing it all while the intended parents are off bonding with their new baby, which is exactly what should be happening. But it can feel isolating. This is why post-birth support is so important. Having people check in on you. Making sure you're healing okay. Making sure you have what you need. Your agency should be doing this. Your partner should be doing this. Your support system should be doing this. Don't try to push through and act like everything is fine if it's not. Speak up if you need help. The impact on your family needs to be addressed. Your decision to become a surrogate doesn't just affect you. It affects your entire family. And that's something you need to really think about before you start. Let's start with your partner if you have one. They're going to be living through this journey with you. They're going to see you go through the medications and the appointments and the pregnancy. They're going to have feelings about it. Some partners are incredibly supportive. They understand why you want to do this. They're proud of you. They help with the injections. They go to appointments when they can. They take on extra responsibilities at home when you're not feeling well. Other partners are supportive but struggle. They worry about your health. They don't love seeing you in discomfort or dealing with side effects. They miss having your full attention and energy. They're making sacrifices too, because your time and energy is going toward this journey. And then there are partners who aren't supportive, who agreed to it initially but then regret it, who feel resentful, who don't like the intended parents being so involved in your life, who struggle with you being pregnant with someone else's child. The last scenario can really damage a relationship. This is why most agencies require that your partner be on board. Usually they'll interview your partner separately. They want to make sure you're a united front on this. But even supportive partners can struggle sometimes. Communication is key. Keep talking throughout the process. Check in with each other. Make sure they feel heard and appreciated. Remember that they're sacrificing too. They didn't sign up to be a surrogate, but they're living it alongside you. Then there's your kids if you have them. They're going to notice that mom is pregnant, and they're going to have questions and feelings about it. How you handle this depends on their ages. Younger kids might not fully understand. You can explain it simply, that you're helping another family have a baby, that the baby isn't ours and will go home with their parents after birth. Older kids can understand more nuance, but they might also have more complex reactions. They might worry about you. They might be excited about having a baby around and then disappointed when the baby leaves. They might feel embarrassed or confused when talking to friends about it. Some surrogates involve their kids in the journey. They let them feel the baby kick. They bring them to ultrasounds sometimes. They talk openly about the intended parents. This can help kids feel included and understand what's happening. Other surrogates keep more separation. They don't involve their kids too much. They handle the pregnancy more independently. This can work too, especially if your kids are young. Either way, your kids need reassurance. They need to know you're okay. They need to know you're still their mom. They need to know this doesn't change your family. And they need preparation for when the baby is born. They need to understand that the baby is going home with another family. That it might feel weird when the baby is gone. That it's okay to feel whatever they feel about it. Your extended family is another consideration. Parents, siblings, other relatives. How are they going to react? Some families are supportive and proud. They think it's an incredible thing you're doing. They help out. They celebrate milestones with you. Other families don't get it. They think it's strange. They worry you're being exploited. They have moral or religious objections. They make judgmental comments. This can be hard. You want your family's support, but you can't control their reactions. All you can do is be clear about your decision, set boundaries around negative comments, and surround yourself with people who are supportive. Your friends and community are also going to have reactions. Most people are curious and supportive, but you'll encounter some negativity, some people who don't understand, some who judge. You'll also encounter a lot of questions. So many questions. About money, about how it works, about whether it's hard, about the intended parents, about your body, about everything. Some of these questions are innocent curiosity. Others are invasive. You don't owe anyone a detailed explanation. It's okay to keep some things private. It's okay to say you're not comfortable discussing certain details. All of this is to say that surrogacy is a family decision. It impacts everyone in your household. Everyone needs to be prepared. Everyone needs to be supported. And everyone's feelings matter, not just yours.